Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Double Trouble Wednesday with Jessie in the back and me, Chantelle, your hostess, definitely with the mostess of everything. So I hope you guys are having a wonderful week. And yeah, isn't it hump day today? Don't they call Wednesday like hump day? That kind of hump, guys. Okay. But anyway, before Jessie gets on, let me just go through the schedule for the rest of the week. Of course, Jessie. Unfortunately, no Jamie J tomorrow. We were unable to record last night. So we're rescheduling our recording and I will let you guys know when she's back on again. And then, of course, on Friday, membership with Jessie, members only here on YouTube. And we're going to be looking at the Charlie Kirk scenario, fiasco, whatever is going on there. Jessie did some deep dives on her channel. So I'm going to be watching those completed, and then we're going to be doing a discussion on that. So join us on Friday for that. And again, guys, check the schedule for the weekend. There's a few recordings that I'm doing and will be doing. And so they aren't always up on the schedule. But yeah. And for those of you, yes, my book. Yay! Adventures from the Ankara Field, that's out. Sorry, The Honeycomb Tale, Adventures from the Ankara Field. Yay, that's out and available on Amazon. And all you Frenchies, it's coming up in French as well. So we've definitely come on with dual language, and it's really cool. So check it out. I'll be putting up more stuff on social media in the next few days. So yeah, hope you enjoy it. For those of you who already received it, I know I've received quite a few emails from you who've already got it. So I hope you guys have loved it. I'd love to get your feedback on that. Yay, and without any further ado, ta-da. Jessie, how are you, madame?
Doing well. Hold on, I cannot. I have to quick respond to an emergency.
Oh, okay.
Give me 1 second. All right. We're just gonna have to deal with it.
No, no worries.
Um, yeah, so let's go ahead. We gotta start with this. Go ahead to the first slide. This series is very exciting, and I know before we start, we're gonna pray. And forgive me as I gather myself. I was getting nonstop texts at the moment.
You're welcome to take a breath and deal with whatever you need to for a minute or two. I know I had that the other day as well. I was all over the place for a few minutes.
Well,
So
give
you're
me
welcome.
just a moment that if you don't mind, I'm gonna just, I
Absolutely.
don't know how to
Absolutely.
take my camera off on this.
I can do that for you if you want me to.
That'd be great. Yes, just give me like 5 seconds and I'll be right back.
Perfect. Guys, you just got me for the next 5 seconds. But anyway, that's not a bad thing. Oh, and by the way, we're doing, for those of you, I wanted to announce as well. After this, of course, today with Jessie's the Minnesota land grab, part 2 from what we were doing last week. Absolutely shocking, actually, how they screw us over, right? I mean, worldwide. I was listening to last week's show about the stamps and everything else, the charges, the fees we get charged, amounting into billions of dollars. And it's really just been stolen. And it's happening worldwide. So I really think it's an important show for everyone to get, as long as we can, you know what's happening, we can do something about it. That's the way I see it. And then, of course, show 2, we're going to be talking about Hillary's frazzles. Now, I don't think we need to be going into too much detail about what that is, but I think we know. I think Jessie's going to be sharing more with us about Hillary, her experiences with Hillary in the system. Anyway, yeah, my book. It's the Ankara Field. Basically, it's 6 stewards. Well, a couple. There's 4 bees. The bees, because the bees were the original frequency keepers of everything. When we talk about sound, frequency, and vibration, the bees were the first frequency holders that created the grids of the earth, basically. And that's why bees are so important, and honey. And if we look at everything in the world right now that is reversed, they've reversed it, the bee consciousness. It's become the reversed hive mind. So what this is all about is really flipping the hive mind, the dark nest, as I call it in the book, because the bees, of course, have got the honey and the hexagons filled with honey and God's manna, which is food for everyone. And of course, the dark nest is where the wasps and everything else is flipped it and stolen light, the things we do here. And there are beautiful little stewards on the Ankara field, which is going to be Shankara and Solara. We are formed as human beings. We are shaped like the Ankh. So we are resonance forks. So when we tune our frequency, we fly or we spiral down. So it teaches us about resonance and frequency. And then, of course, we have the bees. We have Ka, the Khoisan elder, and Boysen the kangaroo, and 4 bees, Ariella the queen, Hummingbee, the singing bowl bee. Oh, it's lovely. And then Albert and Aurora, the amazing humans, and they have adventures, and they just turn things around from awful things to light by humming and just being in love. So I hope you enjoy that. Jessie, are you done?
Thank you for your grace this morning, everyone. No, I think, it's interesting. I was catching the end of what you were saying there, and how important it is to realize that, all of creation is a part of that song that the Lord made. And there are those different aspects and parts to that, and it's like all of, when you look into it, like I get into it in some of my courses too, the God's universal design, and our bodies are actually made according to that design of his spirit, So it's very interesting, like, everything that we see there, we see within our bodies, and all of that even foretelling of the works of the Lord. Like when you think of the shape, the form, it's not by accident that we're shaped like a T, when we put our arms out. That is highly connected with the music, the Lord's song, and the Lord's voice of his spirit. So
Absolutely.
yeah, very interesting. And so
well,
oh, sorry, go ahead for getting a little.
No, I was going to say, I think it's just, amazing that we can, it's just a wonderful time to just have fun, and delight in creation, because that's really the antidote for the suffering. Us enjoying our lives does not take away from anything that anyone else is going through, and we must remember that. And I think that's what it's about, because the more joyfulness we can bring into the world through our own spirit, through our own lives, and the more generous and giving and kind we are to those around us, we spread the honey or the manna, God's manna. And that's really what the honey is about spiritually. It heals everything, so just to be in that space of love is what we create rather than destroy. So I think it's through a lovely creative process that we're going to win over whatever the battles are we're currently facing. Yeah,
the creativity, and I love the creativity in that, and the innovation, the just being able to express, what's on your heart. And you do, you have such a beautiful heart and such a beautiful platform here. So
Thank
we
you, Jessie.
appreciate.
I appreciate you too, and everybody. Thank you.
Right. Well, let's go ahead. We'll pray for today. And Lord, we just come before you, Father. We thank you that you made us in your image. We thank you, Lord, that your light, your goodness, your love is the very depth of who we are. And so many of us have gone for so long without that, Lord. We search for that. We long for that. And not just to get a taste of it, we long for that depth of togetherness, community, and being able to give love, but also receive love. So, Father, we thank you for those reminders. We thank you for the reminders that we are all part of that song, that we each have a voice, and that that voice is powerful, and it powerfully, makes the song that you are creating of they're bringing, it brings a fullness to your song, Lord. So we thank you for that. We thank you that we can experience that we can experience that togetherness, that community here. We thank you for all these opportunities that you give for us to gather together and to really grow, learn, and just be together. So we thank you for that, and we praise you. We ask that you would guard our conversation today, guard our technology, our internet, our airwaves, and we ask, Lord, that you would keep all distractions at bay so that our focus can be on the things that you want to teach us this day. We ask for this in your powerful name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jessie. Thank you, everybody. It's always awesome to see you in the chats. And busy. Wonderful, Jess. So are we good?
Yeah, let's go ahead with this. So, as we get into this series, I'm glad that you brought out too, it is important to understand it's not just about the state of Minnesota. It very much involves so many different states. It is international. We're going to, see it as we begin to unfold things. You're going to pick up things in your area, your country, your state. And, the overall goal is to create that awareness, but also to teach, when we're aware of these things, what can we do about it? I believe we have a responsibility to call to account. These individuals have been working for centuries to steal and to rob from us, and not just to steal and rob, but then to suppress and oppress us in the midst of that. And it's time for us to stand. There's an imagery that comes to my mind as I speak of all this, but the Lord, everything that is here in this earth belongs to God. And we are called to be stewards of that. And when we think of things, the Lord has books, He has accounts. We are held to account for the things that are in His house. And how are we going to steward those things? And if we realize that there are false accounts, we have the duty to make those accounts, to get rid of those false accounts, to remove them, and to make sure that everything is in proper working order. So this series is really about teaching that, what is the proper working order? How is it supposed to work? And, how do we recognize that? Now, with that, I have to give a correction as we start over last week. I know I'm thankful for those who put it up in the chat. I did take a wrong number, and they were right in that with the math. So I had it written down on a piece of paper, the correction, but I do not have that right in front of me right now. But we should have multiplied the number by the 990, and then that would be the correct answer. So if people go back that correct answer was kind of worked out in the chat under that show, that I just wanted to acknowledge that that was the correct answer in that. And I'm not the best at math, so I appreciate, you know, I appreciate that. I just got going, you know, and was like, oh, I think this is what that is. But yeah, so as we go forward, go ahead and put up the first picture there.
I just actually wanted to say this is why we have awesome viewers, because they'll actually tell us. And you know what? It's amazing, because when we sit on these platforms, just there, it's so many people from so many different parts of the world that actually have so much knowledge. And I really appreciate that. So
Right.
we really
We all
appreciate
need each
it.
other. You know, all of
Yeah,
you who are highly mathematical and good with numbers, I need you personally. So,
absolutely. I most definitely do. Okay, here we go. Let's start with the first one.
all right. So, a lot of these series are going to interconnect with ones that I'm working with on my website, kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. My newest series, Architecture and Altars, actually 1 through 3 are now up on the website. So I encourage you to watch that, because as we get into this, as we begin to follow the money stream, what we're going to find is that everything above ground is an outline. It's a map of what they're doing below ground. You know, why are they stealing the money? You know, why would they take the time to tax us and, you know, kind of create these funnel streams of money? You know, is it just for them individually? No. Where does that money go? And, you know, what we're going to realize is that this really is how they've been funding their deeds underground. Um, you know, they're taxing us, you know, oppressing us, making us pay for the things, their projects that they're doing underground. Um, you know, and some of the stuff I've brought out is, you know, the underground submarine lines. You know, how do they get that money for their equipment? You know, how do they build their big submarine hubs and bases? How do they continue to expand and grow? You know, we're paying for their expansions and their continued infiltration worldwide. You know, so it's not just here in America, it's, you know, across nations. So, you know, I encourage you, go to my website. Another vital series to watch is the Unveiling the System series, in that I really begin to break down the system itself, how it works, how it operates. So let's go ahead and get into this part 2 of the Minnesota land grab. And, you know, we're focusing here how the money flows, but in connection to the water rights. You know, this is a massive theft of rights from we the people. As we, you know, go back to the first episode we did, we talked about, and even further, you know, we did an episode on the fans and, you know, the windmills and the Austin, Minnesota area. What we have happening, you know, is a connection between what they're doing underground and the energy companies, the power companies. That is going to cross over into your hydro companies, your dams, your reservoirs, your basins, all of the projects that they want to do in regards to water. And why? Because, you know, for what they want to do, they have to have water. You know, nuclear energy is something that is very much in the works for these individuals. I've testified, you know, that in 1984, that was one of their weapons displays, involve children and nuclear, the nuclear weaponization of children. And, so this is going to get further into that and connect back to your energy and your power companies, not just electricity, but water, gas, and others as well. Let's go ahead to the next one. So the map there had shown some of your utility companies. So in our last episode, we began to talk about, what's called a plat, P-L-A-T, and this is an example, this picture is an example of a plat. We have the Breezy Bay plat, which you can look up online and you can see that and see the details of that. It's a public record. And what they do for these plats is they basically are defining. You have surveyors who are going to go out, they're going to physically look at the land, and they're going to mark out that land and the boundaries of that land. Are there trees on that land? Are there major waterway connections? Are there lakes? Are there streams? Are there rock formations? Are there things in that land that go underground? So that's going to be the first step. And then, they're going to zone or decide, what are they going to do with that land? And, so they're going to have their different ways of identifying all that. And there's a process to this. Now, we talked about last time how the process used to just be that you had the surveyors, you had the patent office, and after, they surveyed the land, there would be a patent created, and then you could go stand in line at the patent office and you could get land. But now, they've created all these extra governmental, we'll call them agencies or organizations that are going to oversee and dictate, what happens to the land. And, they're supposedly keeping it in trust for we the people. So, how does that look? As I understand that, let's just say you have the state of Minnesota there. So, Minnesota is broken into cities that are within counties, so county lines. And then those counties are broken down into lots or properties, and you have those who are going to oversee at different offices that we went over in the first show that are going to, record, they're going to keep track of things on deeds, and, they're going to kind of have that governance, but they're going to tax you if you want to change that, what they have on the record. Now you're going to pay every time, that land changes hands, or you want to do something to that land, let's say build on it or transform it in any way that could impact the land itself or the water, they're now going to charge for that. And you have to get permissions to make changes to it. And all those changes, are going to be registered at these different offices. So you're going to also see on these plats, like that middle kind of area that we see, that area contains all the signatures. So that's things that we're looking at. It has to go through different hands. Each of those people are supposed to sign off that it's a true and accurate account and record of the land. So you're going to have, like your surveyors are signing off. You'll have, your auditors, your recorder. So it's going to go through different hands, and you can kind of follow and see you know, who's saying this is a true record. And, you know, many times they're going to go off of, you know, what the surveyors are reporting, because they're going to have with it, you know, what they saw. Um, so then, you know, you can kind of follow who's overseeing that. So, you know, as we look at this, you know, there's going to be public documents, it's going to be public record. You should be able to go to your county recorder's office and see plats, um, or lots. You know, they're going to have books, and you can pull things up to look at your area, your territory. In land surveying, a plot is a legally approved, detailed, and scaled map or drawing of a tract of land that shows its boundaries, divisions, and features. This could include streets, lots, and easements. A plot is created by a licensed land surveyor, and I want to highlight that because as we get further into this series, that word licensed is going to come into play. That's important to know. Um, so keep mental record of that, that licensed is important. So the land surveyor is licensed and serves as a crucial legal document. So it's considered a legal document for real estate transaction, land divisions, development, and resolving property disputes. All right, let's go ahead to the next one. So elements of a plat map. Plat maps are broken into several parts. When you buy a house, you get a tax ID number and a description of a lot in a block, which is part of that plat. So, you know, that's all going to come together with your tax ID number for that. In the case of a plat, this plat, it's called Breezy Bay. Um, the dedication clause, which you'll see that term used. The dedication clause means the street became public, so it's open to anyone to drive on it. So in this map, you know, it's going to highlight if there's streets going across the land, and then they're going to have, you know, a dedication clause which tells you what is that street's purpose. You know, is it something that can, you know, are there any boundaries on the use of that street? Who can use it? So all of those things are going to be defined on these maps by the signs, the symbols, the little images that they use, which we're going to look at. So the whole year's taxes, when you go in and let's say you're getting, you know, that plat or the lot, the division of land, you're going to have to pay taxes for a whole year. And it says the whole year's taxes are paid in the year the plat is filed. So when this is filed, you know, the whole year's taxes are going to be paid for that when you go in to register. After the plat, there can be declarations filed, which tell builders what type of, you know, what can be built on the property. You know, if it's zoned for residential or business, what size houses, what size buildings can be put on that property, you know, what size parking lots, all of that is going to be zoned and defined. And then it will be signed off by the county surveyor and the land surveyor, the county board, or the city board. So these are now, you know, we talked about that middle section that you see, and when you look up the Breezy Bay plat, you'll see signatures in this middle section. So whose signatures? You see the county surveyor, you also see the land surveyor, then you'll see on the plat either the county board or the city board member signing off. You'll see the auditor's signature, the recorder's signature, and the treasurer's signature. So that's what you should see in this, are those signatures. And it should have all of those, not, that's what's required to it. That's who has to sign off on it. Go ahead to the next one. So what does the surveyor do? Land surveyors define statutes that they are operating under. What is a statute, and how do we know who the surveyor is on the plat? Statutes are going to go back to your state laws. Your state will define, how things are going to work and operate together in that area. You can look up, your state, like for this, just say Minnesota, you could look up Minnesota state statutes and statutes will come up. If you want to be specific, you just have to add what you're looking for, what type of statutes, if you're looking for land statutes or, statutes in regard to plats, the surveying of land, what are the requirements for that? All of that should come up as you specifically look for it. But we cover a lot of the ones in this series that kind of relate to, what's required for the surveying and the kind of the governance outline, who has oversight, who's supposed to be keeping the record, and who's kind of overseeing these things today. So the surveyor will have a license number, and on Breezy Bay Plat, we find the surveyor with his signature. So you'll see him have that there. The first person signs, and then the surveyor usually is going to be that first or second signature on the plat. So they're one of the first people to sign on a plat because they're the ones, documenting, mapping what they're seeing, and then, they're basically drawing out what they see, defining it with different lines and details that all have meaning, and they're giving the lay of the land based on their actual observance of the land. So in the Breezy Bay map, the surveyor is identified in the middle of the document, in that middle section there. A plat must have 4 signatures that sign off on it. So in that, the County Board of Commissioners, or we kind of went over this on the last slide, but you're going to have the land surveyor and the county surveyor, usually are first or second. Then you'll have the County Board of Commissioners and the City Board. You'll have the county auditor, the county recorder, who gives a number and a date and a time on the document. The surveyor knows all has, he knows all, and how it's going to be defined. They're going to use a term with the surveyor. They call it the metes and bounds, METES, and bounds description of the land and the property. Metes and bounds means a boundary or a boundary stone. It was a term used in regard to measurement. If you've got a field, let's say everybody wants fields, but you've got this land that's adjoining, and one person saying, this is my side, the other saying, this is my side. how are they going to define that land? They would use boundary stones in the old days to begin to define where are the natural boundaries. They could also use things like riverbeds and different, maybe trees, a row or line of trees. But meets and bounds is what are the natural boundaries of the land. And your surveyor is going to understand every aspect of the boundaries descriptions because they're seeing it, firsthand experience. Go ahead to the next one. So these are some examples. As we begin to look into this, it's important to start to understand how to read. How do the surveyors, mark the land? They do it by creating maps. Those maps are going to contain all these lines and symbols. Understanding the boundary descriptions on plats and how to read site plans that, so these site plans are going to represent both land and water. What I have here are many of the different symbols that they can use in regards to water. So you notice, starting at the very top there, some of their symbols are just, it could be marked by a straight line, straight solid line. Then you get, where you might have a thicker line and then a shorter line above it or a thinner line above it. When you get to the middle of that top one, you start to see like different forms of dashes, some long, some short dashes, some equal dashes. All of those represent different things to them and tell them, it defines the levels of the water, what kind of water source it is, how does that water flow, all of that. So they can look at the map, they can read it, and they can understand all those details about the land or the water that they're representing. And so I encourage you guys, do some research, start looking up, maybe test out, figure out how you identify certain things on your property, and begin to understand how this is all operating. So there are several main boundary descriptions used on plat maps to represent water, and this just kind of gives you a taste of how in depth the descriptions are. There's a lot there. Go ahead to the next one. So on this, we see on the map here for Breezy Bay, as it gets further, the first page showed all the signatures and showed a general picture of the map, but then, you've got multiple pages with a plat document. So this is just another page, and we see that now they've taken the land and they begin to break down further by lot. So you see that land separated into lots, and each of those lots are going to begin to be defined. What are their characteristics? Now, over on kind of that your left side, we see, they give a description. They're going to tell you about the different symbols and some of the specifics. That's like your key, and then you have another key all the way on the right hand side. But we see kind of right to that key on the left, I tried to highlight with 2 red lines there. Those are specific things on the Breezy Bay map that are words that say islands. So you have a massive waterway off on that left-hand side of the land that's marked there. And you have some islands that are marked, but they don't have the word islands. Like they'll write a word there, but it's not solid. Um, Instead, like if you saw a close-up of that, the word island is created with all these little dashes. And why did they do that? Why not just write the word island there? Why they put the word island in dashes is because it shows that it's in the they're in the process of changing something. They're transitioning something. They're going to redefine um, or do something different with it. So that's why they put the word island in all these little dashes, is because they're telling you that it is on the map, that it's in the process of being changed. All right. So go ahead to the next one. So what is the process? In its simplest form, the surveyor goes out and surveys the land and draws up a map by plat. The surveyor defines the land, the water, any electrical or structural things on the land, and natural details of each plat. Then the surveyor signs off on the plat map and gives it to the title company or the auditor, um, the treasurer, and then the county recorder. So it's gonna, go through all those people. It'll be given to the auditor, then the treasurer, and then the county recorder, who will put it on the record and the books. Now, the county auditor sets up each lot and blocks it for taxes. So they're going to assign a tax number to it and get it ready so that they can begin to tax that property or that land. Whoever, is the owning or overseeing that. Then the land deed or mortgage is posted to descriptions of the new land described in the plat. So they're going to start to, put all these pieces of paper with the information about the property that will all be included in that deed or mortgage. They're going to start to put all those defining things together. And the plat with the deed mortgage are put into a new book with the county records. And basically the recorder will set up a new tracking system according to the lot in the block of that new plat. So they begin to kind of track what's going on with that land, but strictly for the purposes of receiving a tax from it. All right, go ahead to the next one. So how the theft occurs. Now I want to start by pointing out some of the symbols. In my series, the Unveiling the System, and all the other series, we've done a lot of decode series on here. I brought out the importance of their symbols, their signs, and how we can understand certain things that they're communicating by the symbols that they use. We know that a lot of the departments within the United States, like you have your United States Army Corps of Engineer, they're filed under a sigil. What we see there on the left is their sigil. And that sigil tells you, what brotherhood groups are involved. It tells you kind of what they're doing, what are their specialties. The sigils and the coat of arms are going to give a regional as well as a quadrant authority. So we see your Army Corps of Engineers, their primary authority, because it's in a sigil, is going to be regional. However, because we see a coat of arms and we see that eagle on top of the coat of arms looking like it's beginning just to take flight, or it's mounting for flight, that tells us something very significant about the Corps of Engineers. whenever you see that mounting eagle like that, it tells you that there are junior Nazi training programs involved. And, you know, because it's sitting on a coat of arms, which is used to identify quadrant territory, it tells us now that, you know, that your army, your Corps of Engineers is going to be connected to those junior training programs. And it tells us for which ones, because, you know, we see that coat of arms, we see the blue, and we see kind of that, uh, hor vertical flag. We know that when we see the coat of arms with that flag, like that symbol, that represents your Sons of Liberty. It's defining a specific sovereign military group and those who are going to be trained in it, and it's telling the training specifications. So they're going to be specifically connected to, you know, those that are being trained up as your Sons of Liberty under that branch of your knights. Um, we also see, you know, some of the others, the U.S. Army engineers, they're building strong. We see another coat of arms there, and we see that, you know, with a castle in it. The red castle is another symbol that they're going to use, signifying that castle. When we see that, it represents underground, whether connected to marketplaces underground or breeding programs. Um, you know, it tells you that there's an underground aspect to their position and what their oversight. Um, so, you know, it's important to know how to read, you know, beyond just what we see at the face front, what we're being told they do. We know that there's more that is involved with this. So let's look at how the theft occurs. Um, this is where we're going to get into the law. The Minnesota law, the 505.21 statute, um, you are supposed to have two surveyors. So it defines that, you know, on those plats, you are supposed to have two surveyors who are signing off on that. One, you know, one signing that I went, I looked, I mapped it out, here's the map, and the other, you know, in response, coming into agreement with that. One surveyor represents the county's interest. The other surveyor is going to represent the company or the landowner's interest. There are two overseeing agents in every state that oversee all water rights. So as you've got these surveyors coming, they're looking, they're seeing that there's water on the land. Now you're going to have these two overseeing agents enter in if there's land on the property. You have the Department of Natural Resources. We see their logo there with the M and the half M there on the left. They oversee all water in the state and should have oversight and approval over all changes. This is because water cares for farmers and animals, and their job is to ensure, you know, that there's life-giving water for agricultural rights. It is one way we could put it. You know, they're to ensure that the farmers and the animals have water for crops and for, you know, sustaining livelihood. So remember how we showed that the plat map and we saw the dashed word showing something was changing. The United States Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Army Corps, watches over federal connecting water. So that what is federal connecting waterways? That's going to be water that goes from one state to another. You know, think about a lot of your rivers are going to flow through, like you've got your Mississippi River, which flows through multiple states. So your Army Corps is going to oversee, you know, areas, territories where, and the waterways where that is you know, going through multiple states. Um, Minnesota has a water board that we covered in part 1. So that's another agency that's kind of overseeing water rights. And, um, you know, we know that water rights can include dams, reservoirs, or anything in water that controls the water flow. And the state oversees all of that under Statute 103A.201. So those are some of the statutes, both the 103A, Minnesota Statute 103A, 201, and then you've got the other one we mentioned in there. I'm looking for it, the 50 Minnesota Statute, or sorry, Minnesota Law 505.21. Go ahead to the next one. So definitions used to define water. In land surveying, you have natural bodies of water and you have man-made constructed bodies of water. You know, like your golf courses may have constructed areas where they're putting in waterways. Some of your military labs, some of our creeks, ponds, lakes, some of those are man-made, not natural to the area. So, you know, it's important to know, you know, was it natural or was it a constructed body of water? A reservoir is a constructed body of water. It can include dams across rivers or streams or areas. Reservoirs can also be areas to collect and store water for various purposes. Purposes for collecting and storing water can include water supply, irrigation, and hydroelectric power generation. A basin is a backflow reservoir. In this case, you know, you have some of the waterways considered basins are specific backflow water areas that have been constructed around the Great Lakes that, you know, like if there's flooding or the water levels are rising, the purpose of those basins is to prevent flooding over certain lands or certain areas. So basins are put in to kind of control any overflow that would come from massive bodies of water. On land plats, the different forms and lines will show, you know, the elevation of the water. It will show if there's reservoirs. It will define if there's a basin there that's been put in. A definition refers to the process of clearly showing the boundaries of specific areas. This is where understanding the boundary description keys is important. Let's view that again. And do we have that slide on this one? There we go. So all of that we talked about, the, you know, defining the basin overflows, defining if there's dams, defining the elevation of the water, defining the flow of the water, like down at the bottom there, that bottom on the right, but kind of look at the left, to the left, we see, you know, we see some of the lines kind of curve where like you see almost like a pipe go up and then you see like a 90-degree curve. On the very bottom, you see, bottom right, you see that T-like symbol that represents that there's a cap. Then right above that, that symbol, you know, that kind of goes horizontal and like a T, but then it's got lines through it, that represents there's a tree. You know, so you begin to get these symbols that define everything that's there, including, you know, dams, reservoirs, the way the water flows. Go ahead. Did we have one more after this, or was this our last one? Yep. All right. So the theft works through regulatory policies. And let's look at Minnesota Statute 505.21. I give the website there where you can find that statute. And really what that statute is, it's a regulatory policy, is to conserve the best interest of the people of the state. You know, that's what they're supposed to do. Those who oversee, who are involved in overseeing the water and how, you know, how the land around that water is controlled, you know, whether it's used for development, whether it's used for residential, whether it's used for businesses. Their job is to ensure that in light of how the land is used, that the rights to the waterways are protected for we the people, and that's going to include your farmers and the animals. So that's their job, is to kind of oversee that. The water controlled in use is going to be overseen by both the DNR, and the state supervises the transfers of any reservoirs or dams according to Minnesota Statute 103A.201. But let's look at 505.21 here. I've kind of highlighted the subdivision 8, which is titled Water Boundaries. And the highlighted part, you know, defines further. So the highest known water elevation shall be indicated on the plat if the data is available from the Department of Natural Resources. So they're saying, you know, the elevation should be included on the plat, as well as, you know, if that information, they're going to get it from the Department of Natural Resources and the United States Army Corps of Engineers or another appropriate government unit. All wetlands are defined in sections 505.01 under subdivision 3 and paragraph 1 shall be shown on the plat. The shore or margin of wetlands which do not form a boundary of or within the plat shall be shown as a dashed line. So they define, you know, they begin to kind of make sure that everybody's using the same language, defining how are things to look, what are the regulations, what, you know, what is to be abided by. Go ahead, do we have one more here? So I know this is all harder, there's a lot here, but it's important to go back, take time with it. You know, it's like learning to read a new language. You know, when we get into the surveying, learning how to read the land plats, learning how to read the different identifying marks, learning the statutes. But it's important for us to know these things because, you know, we all are going to live somewhere, right? And if we live somewhere or have a house or own property, it's important for us to know, to be able to know what, you know, how to define things so that people aren't coming in taking advantage of us and stealing from us, you know, from the inheritance that we have. So again, you know, the regulatory policies are going to be overseen by your Department of Natural Resources. Again, another statute we can look at is the Minnesota Statute 103A.201. I give the website there. That statute basically is a regulatory policy. And in subdivision 1, the policy is defined to conserve and to use water resources of the state in the best interest of its people and to promote the public health, safety, and welfare. It is a policy of the state that 1, subject to existing rights, public waterways are subject to the control of the state. 2, the state, to the extent provided by the law, shall control the appropriation and use of the waters of the state. And 3, the state shall control and supervise activity that changes or will change the course, current, or cross-section of public waters, including the construction, reconstruction, repair, removal, abandonment, alteration, or the transfer of ownership of dams, reservoirs, control structures, and waterway obstructions in public waters. So that's what is defined, in these statutes. And I'm not sure, Chanti, how many more do we have for this section? I was trying to count as we went through.
We have about 8 more. Do you want to go through them?
Oh, 8 more?
Yeah.
Is that the first 12?
We've just done the first 12, yes.
Okay, I think we were stopping at the first 12.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so I think this was the last one. We're starting to get into the statutes that you can look up, begin to understand, what are the, as we look at those, we're looking at what is defined as the law, who has control over what, and then we want to apply, looking at the finances, look at the money and the money flow. What are they claiming is their right, their oversight, and then what is the money flow connected to that? So as we do that, that's where we're seeing that, like last time we saw this, that they were applying something that connected to the Stamp Act and how much money, even with the change that we do in the math, either way, it's still a mass amount of money when it continues to multiply, when you think about how many, properties are being sold in an area, how much real estate are we talking about, and then now we're adding a second stream of, we're going to start getting into further as they define, there's more taxes that they're going to be doing and putting on things. It just continues to multiply, and we're talking about, hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars that not just a year, not just every 10 years, we're talking every month the state is collecting mass amounts of money. And what are they doing with it? Who's overseeing their management of that money that they're collecting from us in taxes? And that's what we need to be aware of.
Well, for me, there was a couple of things in your presentation that struck me, and that was the surveyors, right? So now we've got surveyors in the mix as well, no doubt, who are also bought by the system too, because if we look at the way that the cities and towns, etc., are laid out, right? All the town planners, etc., are Freemasons or were Freemasons, so they knew exactly what was what and what's going where. So now, when they obviously dividing the properties, they're now just making doubly sure that that one gets that or whatever's where. So they are involved in the mix as well.
Well, can I add to that something too that's interesting, because as that goes back to the architecture and the altars. What else are they seeing? They're not just, I would propose that these individuals are very specifically trained. They're not just identifying the, when they use the word natural, they're defining the line by the natural elements, I would propose that it's not just the natural physical elements that they're seeing. Are they identifying more? Does that more include what's involved spiritually or underground? And I get into that in my land assignment 2 coaching, how
Yeah.
above ground maps out what's below ground,
No
even
doubt.
by,
Yes.
churches, the way they lay out the cities, the churches, everything is according to their magic ley lines, their energy lines,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
So this gets
Exactly.
kind of deep into what they're all defining. They know exactly what's on that land. And they
Exactly.
know the
They
land they're willing to give you for residential, and the land that they're not, they're going to keep
exactly.
and put
Exactly.
military or a church there, or.
I saw a funny meme on Facebook the other day. It says, funny that if the government discovers gold or minerals on your property, they claim it. But if they discover drugs, it's not theirs.
Right? That's so true.
But also, something you said in, sort of at the beginning, in 1984, with the kids' with the kids' weapons display, and you mentioned the links to energy companies. So did I get that right? So you're saying those who are actually putting together the kids. Now, for those of you who don't know, just a quick explanation. Jessie has done shows with us in the past where she's explained about how, and of course we know this through all the projects, right?
Right?
And the survivors we've spoken to, that these kids' spiritual gifts are weaponized. So they then get taken to these energy weapon display that's specifically in 1984 that you speak about,
Yeah.
where the weapons on display are not machines and guns and stuff. It's kids'
Right.
spiritual gifts that are being weaponized. So they are linked to these energy companies, right? Which
Yep.
then makes me realize one thing, that these billions of dollars that are being stolen from us, the general public, every month on taxes, on water rights, on whatever else godforsaken things that they can come up with, is actually funding these secret projects.
Right? That's precisely right. And when you follow the money stream, you realize how massive, that is, and the investment in that. I've spoken how, really the shift in that, where you have the involvement with the energy companies directly, that goes all the way back. It began around the 1953 to 1957 was when certain individuals connected to the system were reaching out, showing NORAD military base, the spiritual gates and the connection with the mass amounts of power and energy with those gates. That's when they began, around 1957 to 1963 was when NORAD started um, those programs, in their military bases and began taking over that, working in connection, particularly with Raytheon Energy. Now we go current day, look at some of your states, one of them being Wyoming. Wyoming has trusts with the energy companies where the schools are funded through trusts paid by the energy companies. Is that just because they're getting all this energy and electricity and have it overflow and want to support the schools? Absolutely not. That was one of the major training hubs for kids being trained up in the sovereign military order under Michael Carcock and Colonel Michael Aquino. I've talked about that area in my affidavits about the Wyoming area and their hubs there. Um, So, you know, it all is highly interconnected. So think of that, you know, we know that we can see right in the state sigil for Minnesota, you know, you see that big star up on the right side representing what? Underground military base. Then you have the, you know, where the words are, you've got the numbers that used to be on that bottom, and then now you've got a diamond on that bottom of that sigil telling us there's underground Nazi submarine lines, right?
Mm.
Well, what else is that connected to? Why do you have all your energy, your hydro plants kind of in that middle area of the state? It's because there's lines that go all the way up and over underground. Those submarine lines go all the way up and over. And, you know, they're going to have an above ground way to, you know, monitor, to have things in places. Why? Because they've got massive hubs under there that they're utilizing. Um, you know, so you can begin to further outline, you know, what is happening underground, where's the money flowing and who's it flowing through. Um,
Well,
you know, think of
exactly.
it, your electric companies too. How much do they charge you? We're electricity should be free. There's more than enough. We don't need to be charged for it. You know,
Yeah.
we don't need to be charged for their oversight of our electricity. There is more than enough energy there for all of us to have our homes, our businesses, our towns, our cities, all free. All of your underground cities, they don't charge them for electricity. You know, they don't need to charge, it's just there. They have all the light they want, they have all the water they want down there. You know, why,
Well,
why are we getting charged for it?
well, I think we are funding it. That's exactly what my point is that
We're funding
we,
their evil deeds. We're not
yeah,
funding their electricity down there. They've
well, we're
got
funding.
universal supply.
I'm saying that when we're wondering where the government gets the money to fund these despicable projects that they've been doing for decades now, this is where it's coming from us. It's coming from us. We
Yeah,
are indirectly funding these projects through them stealing from our taxes and stamps and everything else. This is where the money's coming from. And that is the most disgusting idea ever, that they are actually stealing from us to torture our kids. That's the
right?
reality of what I'm
To
seeing
get
here.
access to the children. That's exactly
And
right.
torture them and pay horrific scientists and evil monsters billions and millions of dollars to do this to our kids. That's the reality of what I'm seeing here. And they're
Yeah.
doing it in these ways.
And
Wow.
if you don't pay your taxes, what are they doing now? They're foreclosing on properties and literally taking the property from you. Um, you know, thieving at a new level. You know, how that's how they're gaining a lot of things is by making things where people can't afford or pay. If they want the land, they're finding a way to take the land. Um, you know, their primary way of doing that is through it is financially.
Well, I think, and this is the whole thing, is because we are so bound to their financial system and we are so bound to their laws and to, whatever they tell us we do. We're born into bondage, basically. We're born into a
Yeah.
system that does not allow us to be free and sovereign. And that's what we need to realize. And I mean, of course, when we're looking at this and we're seeing where all, like, how are they funneling and laundering these? Because last week I was like, okay, so now they're taking this money. What are they doing with it? Are they building fat houses for themselves on the beach, or what's happening? I mean, corruption is corruption, but to how, I mean, how much corruption can you actually do, right, in one life without having everything. So they are actually being funneled into horrific, evil projects.
Yeah.
Wow. Guys, this is hectic. So next time you buy your revenue stamp to pay your taxes for a property you're buying, or having your water switched on, or your electricity switched on, that's where your taxes are going to torturing our kids in these secret projects.
Right. And, the way it has to be changed, I think, is, at the administration level, the executive and the legislative branches, that's how to combat this. We have to get the laws changed. We have to say, what, the stamp tax is a dead tax. That war is way over. Why are we now, all these generations later, paying for that war that's already paid off? We're asking legislatively remove the Stamp Act, from we're not going to pay the tax anymore. Let's get rid of it. And, we need to start demanding our legislators make those laws so that we're not bound by the state level to those laws.
But we should also start demanding what is happening with that money. So these taxes, so
right?
Where are our taxes? Because at the end of the day, the government works for us. We have to remember that. But that's the illusion. That's the BS we've been fed into believing the government and the police force and everyone, all the civil servants, they work for us. That's rubbish. We know.
This gets into an important challenge that on Telegram, under the podcast that I'm on there, Truth Punisher, we just put out last night, because when we get to the children, we have information now about something that is happening to children, particularly in the state of Wyoming. I encourage you to go to timothycharleshomeseth.com, and you'll see the articles he has up for that child and the things that are happening. And a challenge went out last night on that, stay tuned, watch my Twitter. We're going to put out for signatures, and, it's time that we hold the state of Wyoming accountable for what's happening to the kids in that state. And it's going to take all of us. And I would love, to have this platform, all of you join in on that. We are going to petition the state and different officials in that, as well as those who are in charge of, ensuring that children are able to report about the crimes happening to them, as well as, receive due process in their reporting. We're going to hold them to account. So be watching Twitter for that, and you'll see the videos. There's information about that child that you can view on there. And really, there needs to be a lot of prayer right now, because, it's not just something, that happened in the past just to me as a kid. The truth is that the horrific things we're talking about, the horrific things we're going to get into with Hillary later today in our next show, these things are happening now. There are child witnesses who have come forward testifying that these things are still happening, that it happened to them, that, they detail what was their experience. And, we need to be quick to hear what our kids are saying, and we need to be those that are going to stand with them and fight with them. That they are heard, that they do receive their rights to to report criminal activity, and they receive due process in that.
Indeed.
And that should be every state's goal. If they ensure the rights for the farmers and the animals, should we not also above all things, ensure the rights of our children. They have the right to be heard. They have the right to tell about what is happening to them. They have the right to call people committing criminal activity to account. There should be nothing more important to us than the voices of our children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. Interesting again. We will continue this conversation again next week, guys. Got a few extra slides and things to go through. But part 2, we're going to be doing where Jessie's going to be talking and highlighting and diving deeper into HRC, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Which one, you ask? I mean, they're not even ashamed or embarrassed.
Oh no, yeah, the fakers are bad. They're like, Hillary would never let herself go. She spent over $2,000 on a pair of yoga pants. She's not going to let herself go.